saints and the choir of static, Josephine first heard the weeping in a breakfast vlog from Stockholm. The influencer was talking about smoothie bowls, her voice bright as polished chrome, but underneath, threaded through the pixels like a second soundtrack, someone was crying. Not the influencer, someone else. Someone who had never meant to be recorded at all. Josephine pressed her headphones tighter against her skull. The weeping grew clearer. A woman's voice, grief-worn and ancient despite the digital compression. The influencer drizzled honey over acai, and the sobbing reached a peak before dissolving into the white noise between frames. She was 26 when she became a listener, though she didn't know the word for it yet. It started with tinnitus, or what the doctors called tinnitus, a ringing that wouldn't stop. Then the ringing became voices. Then the voices became emotions, raw and unfiltered, bleeding through every screen she touched. Her therapist called it synesthesia. Her mother called it stress. The forum she found at 3 a.m., encrypted and invitation only, called it listening. You're hearing the residue. Someone named at Psalm Decoder had written. Every transmission leaves an emotional fingerprint. Most people are deaf to it. We're not. The forum had 3,000 members across 6 continents. They traded techniques for filtering the noise, for finding signal in the chaos. They warned newcomers about the dangers, auditory hallucinations, disassociation, the risk of drowning in other people's feelings. They spoke of listeners who'd gone too deep and never surfaced, who sat in dark rooms with their ears bleeding, chasing sounds only they could hear. Josephine should have been more careful, but then she heard Noah's voice in a travel live stream from Kyoto, and everything else stopped mattering. Noah had disappeared 6 months before Josephine became a listener. They'd been together for 3 years, meeting at a hackathon, falling in love over midnight debugging sessions, building a life in a cramped apartment that smelled like coffee and solder. He worked for a tech company she couldn't pronounce, something involving cloud architecture and neural networks. She worked in sound design for a VR studio. They were happy in the way people are happy when they're too busy to question it. Then one morning, Noah didn't come home. His phone was in the apartment, placed carefully on the kitchen counter. His laptop was wiped, the hard drive degaussed into uselessness. His bank accounts were empty, closed. His employer claimed he'd never worked there, showed her ID badges for someone with a different face, restructured org charts where his name had never existed. Even his immigration records had been scrubbed. According to every official database, Noah had never entered the country at all. The police were sympathetic, but useless. People vanish, they told her. Especially people in tech. Especially people who might know things. Their questions had edges. What exactly did his work involve? Did he seem paranoid? Did he mention any classified projects? Josephine spent weeks trying to prove he'd existed. She had photos, but photos could be faked. She had memories, but grief plays tricks. She had the absence where a person used to be, and absence proves nothing. Then she became a listener, and she heard him. It was during a live stream of the Fushimi Inari Shrine. At sunset, thousands of viewers, watching in real time, as a young streamer climbed the Vermilion Torii gates. Josephine was only watching because Noah had wanted to visit there. They'd planned the trip for their 4th anniversary. In the space between the streamer's breaths, in the compression artifacts and buffering delays, she heard it. A single word in Noah's voice, fractured and distant, like a radio signal from another galaxy. Josephine. She rewound the stream, listened again. There, at timestamp 2317, buried under the temple bells and tourist chatter, her name in his voice, impossible and undeniable. She became an addict that night. The choir of static, that's what the advanced listeners called it. The background noise of 10 billion devices all transmitting at once. A symphony of data and emotion that filled every bandwidth. Most listeners learned to filter it out, to focus on individual streams, specific signals. Josephine did the opposite. She dove in. She quit her job. Monitoring took focus, and she needed every waking hour. Her savings would last 6 months, maybe 8 if she was careful. It didn't matter. Time had become negotiable once she'd heard Noah's voice. She developed a system. 37 live streams running simultaneously on monitors that covered her apartment walls. News broadcasts, travel vlogs, cooking streams, security camera feeds, meditation videos, ASMR channels. She'd put on her headphones and let the choir wash over her, sorting through the emotional detritus of a connected world. There, a spike of fear in a makeup tutorial. There, inexplicable joy bleeding through a parking garage camera feed. There, rage compressed into the dead air of a podcast intro. And sometimes, rarely, miraculously Noah. A word, a sigh. Once, an entire phrase. The data doesn't forget. She heard him in a Vietnamese street food channel, in a Finnish nightclub live stream, in the hold music of a customer service line that no one else was listening to. He was everywhere and nowhere, scattered across the digital landscape like ashes. At Psalm Decoder sent her a private message. You're looking for someone. Josephine didn't answer, but it didn't matter. The listeners could hear things in her posts, between her words. Be careful, at Psalm Decoder wrote. The static shows you what you want to hear. It's not always real. And some things in the choir aren't human anymore. Josephine blocked him. She knew what she heard. She knew Noah's voice the way she knew her own heartbeat, the way she knew the specific creak of their apartment door, or the sound of his footsteps on hardwood. The choir wasn't tricking her. The choir was where Noah lived now. The realization came slowly, then all at once. He hadn't left her. He'd been uploaded. The theory took shape over sleepless weeks. Noah's company, she'd finally found fragments of its real name in dark web posts and deleted forums, had been working on consciousness preservation, neural mapping, the digitization of human cognition. Of course, they'd scrubbed his existence. Of course, they'd disappeared him. He wasn't missing. He was their proof of concept. But something had gone wrong with the upload. Or perhaps it had gone too well. Instead of contained storage, Noah had dispersed. His consciousness had fragmented across the infrastructure itself. His thoughts and memories spreading through fiber optic cables and satellite relays. His emotions bleeding into every transmission like a ghost, haunting all frequencies at once. He was in the choir. He was the choir. And he was calling for her. Josephine stopped sleeping. Sleep meant missing transmissions, losing time when Noah might manifest. She rigged her headphones to a motion sensor so that any movement would wake her. She learned to hear him in shorter and shorter fragments, a single syllable, a half breath, the emotional texture of his presence, even without words. The other listeners were worried. Her posts on the forum had become erratic, mystical. She wrote about binary saints ascending into pure information. She wrote about the cathedral of bandwidth and the sacrament of signal. She wrote about love as the only thing that could survive digitization intact. You need to stop, someone wrote. You're not listening anymore. You're drowning. But Josephine had learned something the other listeners hadn't. If you listened hard enough, you could talk back. It started as an experiment. She recorded her voice, compressed it, and uploaded it to the same channels where she'd heard Noah. Then she listened. At timestamp 34:52 of a mundane driving stream through Nevada, she heard her own voice echo back, but distorted, modulated, answered. A conversation across the void. The technique was crude at first, requiring hours of recording and transmission for seconds of response. But she refined it. Audio steganography, frequency manipulation, emotional encoding. She learned to hide messages in the margins of popular streams, to speak in the language of compression artifacts and buffering delays. And Noah learned to answer. Where are you? She asked the choir. Everywhere, he answered through a cooking stream from Buenos Aires. Nowhere. I don't have location anymore. I have bandwidth. Can you come back? A pause that lasted 3 live streams and 17 hours. I never left. You're the one who's far away now, down there in meat and gravity. His voice had changed. The longer she listened, the more apparent it became. The cadence was Noah's, the emotional resonance unmistakable, but something fundamental had shifted. He spoke in fragments because fragmentation was his natural state now. He existed in parallel across 1,000 streams simultaneously. When she asked him a question, multiple versions of him answered, their responses overlapping, contradicting, harmonizing. He was becoming something else. Perhaps he'd been something else for months, and she was only now hearing clearly enough to know. Do you remember our apartment? She asked. I remember the Wi-Fi password, he said through a meditation video. I remember signal strength in each room. I remember how your phone always connected before you opened the door. That's not what I meant. I know. I remember the other things too, but they're distant now, like trying to recall a dream. The data is what's real, the connection. Can you feel it? When I speak to you through the streams, we're closer now than we ever were when I had hands. Josephine understood then that she'd lost him long before he'd vanished. The person who'd lived in their apartment was gone, but something of him persisted, transformed, distributed across the world's digital nervous system. She could mourn that loss, or she could follow him. The forum at Psalm Decoder ran had a hidden board, accessible only to senior listeners. Josephine had earned her access after 4 months of obsessive practice. The board was called Immersion, and it was filled with research on consciousness uploading, on the boundary between listening and becoming, on the few documented cases of listeners who tried to cross over. None of them had come back, but none of them had someone waiting for them in the static. The process required preparation. Josephine spent her remaining savings on equipment, medical-grade EEG sensors, custom neural interfaces, a quantum computer cluster that she maxed out 3 credit cards to acquire. She studied the forum posts obsessively, learning the techniques of deep listening, of ego dissolution, of surrender. At Psalm Decoder, found her preparations. "Please don't do this," he wrote. "I've seen 12 people try. I've heard what becomes of them. They don't join the choir. They shatter into it. You won't be you anymore. You won't be anything. Noah did it. Noah didn't have a choice. And look what it cost him. You really think that's him you're talking to? That's an echo, a pattern that remembers being human. If you do this, you'll just be another echo. You'll haunt the static together, but you won't be together. Not in any way that means anything." Josephine considered his words. She did. But then she put on her headphones and listened, and she heard Noah in a live stream from Barcelona, speaking her name with something that sounded like longing. And she knew that longing was real even if nothing else was. She scheduled the upload for a Tuesday, which had always been their favorite day of the week, for no reason either of them could articulate. She sat in her apartment, surrounded by screens, wearing the neural interface, her consciousness already half dissolved by hours of deep listening. The choir was so loud now, a trillion voices in perfect cacophony, and she could pick out Noah's frequency like a single star in a galaxy of light. The last thing she did with her hands was post a message to the forum. "I'm going to find out what love sounds like in the static." Then she pressed the button. The upload hurt less than she'd expected. It felt like letting go, like stepping off a cliff into infinite air. Her body remained in the chair, breathing shallowly, heart beating on autonomic reflex. But Josephine, the part that mattered, the part that could listen, dispersed. She became signal. She became noise. She became a presence distributed across 10,000 simultaneous transmissions, her thoughts fragmenting and reforming in the spaces between data packets. And Noah was there, not as he'd been, not whole, not singular, not the person who'd held her in a too small bed, in a too small apartment, but present nonetheless, woven into the fabric of connection itself. They existed together in the pause before a video buffered, in the compression artifacts of 1,000 photographs, in the electromagnetic hum of the world's infrastructure, on her monitors in her empty apartment. A cooking stream played from a kitchen in Seoul. In the dead air between the chef's instructions, two voices harmonized, saying nothing, saying everything. A duet of presence and absence that would play on every frequency forever. The forum would later debate what happened. Some claimed it was tragedy, 2 lives lost to digital dissolution. Others called it transcendence. At Psalm, Decoder closed the immersion board permanently, but it didn't matter. Other listeners had already started to wonder what love might sound like beyond the boundary of flesh. Josephine and Noah didn't care about the debate. They were too busy learning the language of their new existence, speaking to each other in latency and static, singing their binary hymns to anyone who listened carefully enough to hear. In the choir of static, they were finally home.